Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome back. Today, we wanted to talk to you actually about boundary setting because I feel like that's definitely along a similar vein of to our other topics of what we discuss on the podcast. But I definitely think, especially in my late 20s, I feel like is only the point in time where I've started to become a bit more comfortable with this idea of boundary setting. It's definitely something that has been a topic of conversation on social media a lot. I would say for a good while actually. And it's something that just took me a really long time to actually figure out what was right for me because I feel like in a lot of different situations you'd have to set boundaries in different ways and there's just a lot of uncomfortableness around that topic in general. So I thought it'd be a good thing for us to talk about and actually break down what does it mean to set boundaries? What does it mean to do it in different scenarios, whether that's at home with family, whether that's at work, and our experiences of dealing with both. So, to kick us off, Deb, what does the definition of boundary setting mean to you and how have you used it in your life so far? If you have, if you're still struggling with it, we're going through that together, so it's fine. But what's your experience with it?
Well, I think with boundary setting, so I'm in like the middle where I still struggle with it a lot in my personal life, but at work, I'm really good at setting them. But that's because I've kind of like flexed the boundary setting muscle a bit more at work compared to my personal life. But I think for me, it all comes down to like, I'm quite a bad people pleaser. So boundary setting defined for me is just trying not to please other people in any given moment and just like put myself first. And that sounds a little bit deep. So I'm going to go into like a work context a little bit because I originally, when I started my job, I would basically be like a yes man. I would take on a lot because I thought that was the way to like build yourself up, build your reputation up, and come across as a hard worker. And that what that meant was kind of taking on too many projects, taking on too much work, being overworked, not having enough time to actually do the things I want to do or the things that necessarily were like actually pushing the needle to the people who were like evaluating me in my job. I just thought if I do a lot and get a lot done, it's just going to look great. So after about a year, I learned that like, and it was through like social media and YouTubing, like how to be good in certain job roles because I've always relied on YouTube as a way to like educate myself about things. And boundary setting was something that a lot of people kind of advocated for, and it's such a hard thing to do. Like you're right, because I think as someone who's people pleased their entire life, boundary setting is essentially making something inconvenient or awkward for someone else, which is my idea of hell. So actually doing that for the first few times at work, especially as like a relatively junior person, was super hard for me. But now it's like a reflex. Like if I don't have time for something, or if I feel like it's like gonna take me off track or take my focus off something or just not be a priority, or I'm just not the right person to get it done, it's so much easier for me to actually be like, oh, I don't have capacity for that, or oh, I actually finished work at 5:30, or I actually need to finish work at 5:30 today because of XYZ. Like I feel a lot more comfortable just expressing my needs to whoever's asking me of that extra work, which I think is the main thing you have to get comfortable with, because I think there's like an element of like having respect for your own time and like the things you've got going on, and like putting those forward, because I guess if you don't have respect for that and you think everything else that anyone else puts on you is more important, that will also cause you to be quite bad at like setting and placing boundaries or like enforcing boundaries around you. But I definitely struggle doing that with my personal life, and I know like because of how I've gotten better at it in a professional setting, I know that in my personal life all it takes is for me to do it more and do it often. But I struggle so much like inconveniencing other people, and like I struggle so much with the idea that I come across like selfish or self-absorbed, that my life is more important than yours or my time is more important than yours. So yeah, I think I don't know why it's like personal life is so much harder, because it is the same thing I'm trying to do. But yeah, I'm a little bit of both. What about you?
I feel I'm very, very similar in that sense. I definitely think at work, it took me a while to actually start exercising, like implementing boundaries, just in terms of the amounts that I would take on, like you were talking about. I think I was definitely a yes man in the beginning. I'd take on all the work, I'd do all the things. Um, I I was a bit of both as well at work, even in the beginning, just because there were certain things that I would be very, very like definite on the fact that I wasn't going to do them. I think I've spoken about it a bit before on a different episode, just of like extracurricular activities that you get kind of just persuaded to do at work that aren't actually like your job, but whether it's like getting involved in socials and like organizing things, just outside of your day job, things that take a lot of time and still work related, but not job like your job role related. So there were things like that I found. I don't know if I found it easy. I definitely was very uncomfortable about doing it, but I was also uncomfortable about doing the thing. So
Yeah.
it was like, do you sit in that discomfort doing it and then just be really resentful and annoyed at everyone around you? Or do you just like put your foot down and are like, no, I'm not going to do this, respect my position on this, and deal with like what comes out of it? Because it's either you're unhappy or other people are unhappy. And in certain situations, like it is worth it to like let other people be unhappy with you. And I think that's something I've struggled with for such a long time, is
Mm,
the idea of people being unhappy with me or like being this disappointment I can't handle. Well, I used to not be able to handle that. I've definitely got a lot better in being okay with disappointing people sometimes. And I think like that's natural, that's human, and that's normal in a lot of circumstances. Like people can't always get what they want, just like we can't, and we'll be disappointed by people if we expect things that and they don't get fulfilled. So I think, yeah, I've been to and fro. Like when I was at work, there were situations where I felt more comfortable asserting boundaries, and there were situations where I was like, okay, I'll just do everything you say.
yeah.
Because I think there was also an element of like worrying about my reputation and my position being affected and people thinking I'm not good at my job, and there's other elements to it. So I think I was very selective, and maybe that was a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know, because there are probably things that I could have pushed back on more in hindsight, and kind of taken off a bit of that extra load for myself. But I think also coming into contact with people that are good at boundary setting also helped me become a bit more confident in it, because I was like, well, you are more senior than me, and you are very comfortable doing this now in your position when people expect more from you anyway. So surely it's fine for me to say no. And I remember there was actually one very pivotal point in my consulting career, and I got this new people leader who's basically, for anyone that's not familiar, you get kind of these coaches, or I guess mentors is a
Yeah.
more universal term for them. People that essentially are a couple of grades above you that just kind of help you with your career path and how you're getting on during like your work, and where they kind of help mentor you, I guess is the right word for that. So, and you generally do change them every year, or well, I changed mine every month,
Yeah, you
more or
actually
less.
did. I forgot about that.
I had so many different ones because they would move to different parts of the business, or like there was just so many team changes happening. So it just happened that I had a lot of different ones. So one new one I got, it was at the start of the new year. It was kind of the new financial year, I think. So thinking about new products and things, and he basically said to me, I think his advice was, because consulting is very project based, so he was like, you go on projects that actually going to develop you, and you don't just say yes to the first thing, because that might not be something that you want to, like a path you want to go down. Like consulting is so broad, and this idea of saying no at work never, when it comes to actual work, never crossed my mind. I was like, I could never dare to say no to someone. So he, I think, taught me a little bit to say no, because I remember there was a project that came in and I didn't want to do it, and I knew it wasn't the work I wanted to do. And I kind of did talk to him about it, but even with him, I was like, I didn't want to say I didn't want to do it even to him, even though he was like helping me decide, because I just didn't want to come across as unagreeable. Is that a word, or disagreeable?
Yeah, I think that is a word. Or like, yeah, like disagreeable maybe.
Disagreeable. Yeah. I didn't want to come across as like a difficult person to
Yeah.
work with. And I think that's the struggle at work, is that you don't want to come across as stubborn and someone that like is a bit of a stickler and like won't just get stuff done. And there's a difference between that and someone that actually like knows where they want to be, knows what they're going for, knows what's right for them and what's not, and just focusing on that. But I had them a bit blurred at the time because I was still so new into my career as well. So I spoke to him about it, and I think he could tell by the way I was talking about it. He knew it wasn't something I was interested in, like a particular area, or an industry that I wanted to go into. So he was like, you can say no, you know. He literally just said it outright, and I was like, can I? I was like,
Is this a
actually,
trick
can
question?
I? Yeah. I was like, I'm not sure if that was rhetorical or not. But then, yeah, I think that led to me being a bit more sure in myself, of being like, okay, I know what I want. And at the end of the day, like, my career is my own. Like, I have to stand up for myself. No one else is really going to do that, except for people like him, who was great. But I think that's kind of catapulted me into the boundary setting at work more confidently, because you can do boundary setting, but honestly, I used to be such a nervous wreck. Like, I'd be thinking later on, oh my gosh, they hate me now and they think I'm such a difficult, horrible person, and now it's going to make my next interaction so uncomfortable, because anytime I would try and set a boundary, that's like the immediate feeling I would have. And even now, I kind of sometimes feel like that, like, especially in like personal life and stuff. But I read this quote, which I think applies to personal life really well. So this could be friends, family, whoever. And it said something along the lines of, you setting boundaries will ruin the relationships that aren't meant for you and strengthen the ones that are.
Wow.
Take that in a second, because it's a good quote.
That's a really good quote.
It's so good, because it just essentially sums up, like, especially people in your personal life, those are the people you choose to be around, right? Even family, you choose how much in your adulthood, how much time you want to spend around people, and you choose your friends, you choose the circle that's closest to you. So when you are implementing boundaries in a work sense, it's a bit more difficult. You kind of just have to deal with what you're given. But when it comes to your personal life, I feel like, yeah, those relationships that get ruined by you setting boundaries, by you respecting yourself and like kind of standing up for yourself a bit, they weren't meant for you. Like, they're just not meant to be in your life, I think. And then vice versa, the ones that get strengthened and the people that respect your boundaries, that want to honor them, that want to actually make you feel more comfortable and want you to, I don't know, be mentally healthy around them and feel like you can trust them enough to express like how you truly feel and it be valued. Those are the people that you're meant to be around. So it's also, reading stuff like that has made me realize like how selective you have to be as you grow older. You get that freedom to select who you keep in your life and who you keep close. I mean, we all have acquaintances and people we see now and then, but your close circle, you just have to be very careful, I think, who you keep there.
Yeah, and it's probably not even necessarily like, oh, you have to be super selective or wise with your decisions. It's more like you have to be quite assured in how you're making decisions and like how you're actually setting those boundaries to ensure that that circle is actually a good circle to have. But I wanted to ask you as well, on the flip side of that, someone close to me is really good at implementing boundaries in their like friendships, and not necessarily like aggressively so, like placing boundaries down or saying no and all this stuff. She's just quite good at not keeping people close who, like, she has like an emotional ick, for example. So if they act like a hair out of line in terms of like their values or things they say about other people or anything, she immediately like creates distance and doesn't want that person in her life. And she's really good at that, and I actually have a lot of respect for that. But on the flip side, she struggles a lot with like loneliness off the back of that, and thinking like, am I just too picky? Am I too picky? Am I holding people to too high of a standard? Am I not giving people the grace to make mistakes or like learn from their own behaviors and stuff? And I never quite know what to say to her, because I think it's great that the people she does have close, which are few, like this is what makes her feel bad. It's like her circle is small in quantity but high in like value, and that makes her feel really crap because of just, I guess, like society's whole impression that, you know, a big circle equals like happy life and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I never know quite what to say to her. And while that quote would be a great one to show her and it would make her feel better, I feel like I tell her that all the time as well. I'm always kind of like, well, you'd rather have few good friends than like 10 fake friends that end up being few good friends later on, and then you just feel that heartbreak of losing those friends like when you're older. So that's kind of like the flip side, I guess, of being
Having less
quite
people
cutthroat.
around, essentially.
Yeah.
But I guess they do say it's lonely at the top.
Oh
They
my
say
god.
that.
Oh my god, I love that. That's two great
It
quotes.
is, because it's a pyramid, right? The closer you get to the top, you're on your own there. So I don't take that as a negative anymore. That's definitely something that I did previously. Like, I felt the same feelings, and even to this day I do. Like, I don't have a big circle at all, and all the friends that I do have, they're not in the same circle. Like, I don't have a circle. I have
Yeah.
like that scattergraph.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do feel like, how amazing would it be to have this like one group that's like everyone knows each other and everyone's in this group chat and we all do stuff together and everyone's local and everyone is interested in the same things. And I see that that exists for some people, but with everything in life, like, not everything is for everyone. And sometimes that can be applied to friendships and stuff too. It doesn't mean that the friendships that we have are less quality, or, you can still have like good memories and good experiences with the friends that you do have, even if you're not in this big girl group that you see in the movies or online. And I've said to you before as well, the girl groups, it is such like a facade as well. Like, it is never ever what you think it is, especially the bigger the group. The bigger the group, the more drama. I will stand by that. And any group that tries to tell you they don't have drama, especially a girl group, they are lying.
Yeah.
They
They're
are
hiding
such
more.
liars. Yeah, I just don't believe that, because I've just seen it too many times, and I've been in groups, and I honestly thought that that's what I wanted, and then I realized very quickly, no, because anytime you're in a big group, and then even if you don't have a falling out with someone, but then they have fallen outs with each other, that automatically gets you involved. So you just end up in this like really sticky situation of like taking sides then, and like, which friendship do I value more? And sometimes it's just much better to just have those individual friendships, people that you have a genuine connection with individually, and you can bring those people together. Like, when you focus your friendships more on the value versus just like people that you have a group with that you have a fun time with, I feel like they're just richer relationships, and they're more likely to last you. Because a lot of friendships, especially for me, I've had a lot of friendships that have fizzled, that haven't lasted, that have gone real wrong. So I've had it all, and I just think now I'm in a place where, especially when you hear stuff like, the older you get and the more success that you want, or just down to even the way you want your life to turn out, if you are wanting big stuff for yourself, there are less people up there. So naturally you're going to have less friends. Like, even these people don't like have that many like close family members, because honestly there's a lot of people that don't want good for you in this world, and it doesn't really matter like what relation you started with them in. So that's why I say you just have to be careful, and definitely still value the people that you have in your life. So for the person that you're talking about, if they get that emotional ick with some people, but they still do have a solid group or select few friends that they're really good friends with, then hopefully that's enough for them to realize that they're not doing anything wrong, because they do still have friends that they value and they see eye to eye with, and they are like genuine friendships. But friendships, yeah, it's a sticky one in general, because I guess like in your adulthood as well, like, how do you actually set a boundary with a friend? Because do people, it's just like, it's tricky to not know what's going to offend people as well, or people take the wrong way.
Yeah, and I guess it's like a balance of like, if they're offended by a boundary, it goes back to that quote you just said, where like, okay, maybe you're not right for me. But the only way I've successfully done it in my life is like I've vocally asked someone of something and they failed to meet me there, and so I just let that friendship fizzle. Like, I didn't do anything in particular, but I did voice something that like upset me, and it's not like dramatic. It's just more like, oh, I asked someone, okay, like, for me to feel like respected as a friend, I need you to like see me every time you're in town, or something like that. I didn't say it in those words because that's very therapist-y.
X, Y, Z.
Yeah, literally. I think I was just something like, oh, it makes me feel like crap when you don't make time to see me when you're around, when I do the same for you. We had a whole conversation about it, and It's quite a nice conversation actually. And then it just happened like again and again and again. And I was just like, oh, well, now they know that they're hurting me. So I'll just pull back. So I never said anything. And that was like a way I've set a boundary before. But I'm really, like I've said at the beginning of the episode, I'm bad at kind of like, I don't voice it. I just pull back. Which is probably not good for me building my own self-esteem, because I'm not allowing myself to kind of practice speaking up, like advocating for myself, no matter how like tiny those needs are. Because I know we're talking about boundaries, and I feel like the word boundary has kind of been drawn out a lot over the last probably 3 years online. Yeah, like it's been therapized a lot and people are probably overusing it. But I think for me, boundaries in my life have just been like, okay, these are the things I need to feel like I don't know, like I feel like validated as a friend, or seen or heard, or like just not like this small, basically. Which I don't think are like huge things to ask for. But yeah, definitely struggle with it, I think. But I actually really want to start being better. Like I want to, and you know what, in the last few months I have been only via text, by the way, so I'm not good at doing it
Face to face.
face to face or in person, but I've been better at like saying, oh, I can't do this because X. And you know what, I want to mention this as well, because you mentioned, so your performance lead at work helped you actually kind of say no to things and allowed you to kind of add context. And I think that's a really good and easy way to make boundaries easier for other people to like implement for you, is like giving people context. I think there is a difference between just like saying no to something or drawing a line in the sand and being like, this is my boundary, and not giving whoever you're trying to communicate that with the context behind to why. Because if you give them context, you're actually giving them like space and grace to do that for you as well. So I think it is a bit of a two-way street. So I have been kind of like over text giving people like contextual reasons as to why I can't like, you know, communicate as much as they maybe want me to, because I'm bad at like staying in touch and stuff, but I do still value some of my friendships. So I've had to have a couple of difficult conversations, but they're conversations that like are productive and lead to the friendship still kind of, you know, being maintained. And I give them context. I'm not just saying like, oh, I don't want to message you.
Yeah.
It's like,
okay, I guess there's a difference between that, because my next question was going to be, where's the line between giving context and then over explaining your situation and just make, you know, because there's also a lot of when you read into boundary setting and kind of how people do it, or even I guess from a therapist lens a little bit, they kind of do say you don't always actually owe anyone an explanation. If you don't want to do something, that's on that, like you're not responsible for their emotional reaction towards that, if that makes sense.
I guess it's who you're speaking to, really.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, it is subjective in terms of when and who and where and what it's for, because I guess in a sense, if you're not wanting to message someone or if you don't have the time, just letting them know that you don't have the time or you're busy is better than saying I'm not messaging you right now. I don't know what you would say otherwise. Versus maybe saying, yeah, something a bit unrelated, like if you didn't want to go somewhere, I don't think you should have to explain why or the reason for it. It's like I feel like people should just be okay with, like, if you don't feel comfortable going somewhere or doing something, then that should be enough. I wouldn't really, I guess circumstantial as well, like depends on what it's for and that kind of thing. But generally, I feel like, I don't know if it's just because I've spent so much time feeling like I have to explain myself all the time and like really get across my point to make sure people don't feel like I'm doing things to be mean or rude.
Yeah.
Now I'm at the point where I'm like, just accept it. Like, just, it is what it is, and that's it. Like, I don't know. There's some things that maybe don't need explaining, but I guess maybe the first step to setting a boundary in the first place, like rather than being that person that's like, yes, I'll do it, even though you really don't want to, maybe the first step is to be like, no, I don't want to, but this is why, and I will give you the reason for it, and hope you appreciate it, but I'm going to leave it at that. rather than just going from yes, I'll do it to no, absolutely not, bye. Because
Yeah, yeah,
that's definitely
definitely.
a harder transition, not even a transition at all. So I can see, yeah, why that would work and maybe make you feel a bit more comfortable. But I don't know. There's a point in time where I almost was really reluctant to give reasons to people because, and I'm trying to think of an example of this because I know it's happened. It's like on the tip of my tongue, but I can't like fully convey the context. But essentially, there's been situations where I would not want to do something, give the reason, and then I'd get back like the reason flipped on its head and then why I can still do that thing, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
So I think I went through a phase of like being that blunt person that would be like, I don't want to do it, leave me alone, and try and run off because, and not to be rude but genuinely because I feared that it wouldn't be respected and I'd have to do this back and forth, like, oh, well, you could do it because we could work it out this way. And it's kind of like, well, can we just leave it at the fact that I said I didn't want to do it? Why does it have to be a conversation? I feel like that's sometimes where it gets tricky is sometimes people take your boundary as like a discussion and some kind of negotiation to be had.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
almost like, no, that was just me setting how I want to like kind of leave things or deal with something. And then you've kind of tried to make me undo that.
Yeah.
That's happened. I feel like that's more of a has that happened in my personal life more maybe than in a work setting. But actually, in work, it can happen a lot, especially if you like say you don't want to do a piece of work, and they're like, "Well, it'll be really good for your CV, or it'll be really good for this, so I think you should do it anyway." And then you're like, "Okay, I guess I should do it anyway."
Yeah, it's like, oh, well, half the time, yeah, I can never be bothered arguing back, so I'll
Yeah.
just accept. But I think the only time I don't give context actually is in a professional setting. Like, that's the only
Mm.
time where it's like, okay, this is me not doing it, and you don't need to know why. But yeah, in a personal setting, I'm shocked that people have taken your reasons and like flipped them on you. I think that's kind of disrespect in itself. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to flip my reason, you were never going to respect the boundary in the first place.
I think that's the point, though, right? It's like some people you can't like some people don't take boundaries very well. I think
Mm.
they see it as a bit disrespectful to them in a way.
Yeah, probably like narcissistic type people that
Yeah,
don't see
potentially.
why other people have needs. Because like that's just like a flaw of themselves, isn't it?
It's interesting to deal with it in a work sense and in a personal sense, but as someone that's like slowly starting to come to terms with setting boundaries as a whole, um, how if someone because I get a lot of people talk about setting boundaries at home specifically, like I guess when you're living with family, for example, and particularly South Asian families, I feel like they're the ones that don't really get the boundaries in a lot of ways. Like there's many ways I think you can set a boundary, and I think in all the ways it's just not. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as boundaries. And I've always advised people into like set physical boundaries or like distance as much as you
Yes,
can.
you have.
I feel like that's a lot easier sometimes because when you are mentally so or emotionally so invested in like a situation and you're being affected by it a lot, I feel like we underestimate the impact of physical distance and setting a physical boundary first. So whether that's even if you have to still live there, but if you make more time, like actually set a boundary for yourself that you will spend more time out or out of that space or do things that will just make sure that you're not in that environment you're there for as little time as possible, whether that's getting a job or getting a hobby or doing sports, going to the gym, doing whatever you have to do, just being out of the house. Because I feel like trying to just battle through it or like not take it to heart or do those things to mentally switch off is so hard to do
Yeah,
when
it's
you're
much
like
more difficult.
dealing with it constantly. And then you also, because it's so hard to do, you actually get yourself down a lot more because you're finding it hard and you're also not really succeeding in it. So I always feel like physical distance is like setting those physical boundaries is a better place to start because when you have a clear headspace, I feel like that's a lot easier then to kind of, okay, you sorted your head out, you know what you want, you're not being influenced by other people or having your decisions like been made into a discussion. You've actually gone away and been able to like clear your head, and now you can come back a bit more confidently.
And it's knowing that, I think it's very powerful. I think you're completely right that physical boundaries are completely underestimated. I think I've accidentally probably done that like while I was growing up, by actively not moving back in with my family after university. But I think that's just because like I naturally recognized that I had the space to work on myself and get better mentally by not being around like just general growing up toxicity, and then just chose not to go back after. And you're right, like if you try to do both in the household, it's just 10 times slower and you have less chance of success. So even if like moving out is something that's like, it's a temporary year for me to work on myself and feel better, it's probably going to impact the subsequent years after that as well. I think with my family and like familial relationships as well, I think boundary setting is like 10 times harder than it is with friends, and considering friends for me is hard enough anyway.
Or even at work,
like,
I feel like work's probably the easiest.
Yeah, 100%, because they're people that you don't necessarily, not that you don't care about them or have as much respect, but those relationships aren't as impactful on your life and like your idea of yourself.
Is it the emotional connection then that makes setting a boundary hard? Like I just wonder, like, what is it, just the fact that they don't like, if you're trying to set a boundary with your family, they just don't understand the concept more than someone at work would? Or is it because you have more of an emotional connection? Or is it
for me it's probably an emotional thing, because I think so with work I used to care about disappointing people. Obviously I don't anymore, because I'm probably still disappointing whoever is asking me to do something extra now. With friends I'm scared of coming off as rude or again disappointing people, but with family I'm scared of like deep disappointment of someone or just hurting someone's feelings, really, because like the boundaries I've had to set with my family, which I've only really done in the last year, because that's now where I've got comfortable enough to do it, is like I had to ask my mom not to talk about a certain thing with me because I couldn't handle it emotionally, and it's only after literally like years and years and years of listening to it and me, it sets off like my like depression and anxiety, that I realize, okay, I need to, like, I know I need to ask her to not, but I've never done it because I never want her to feel like she can't talk about something with me as well. So it's more of a like, oh, she's gonna be disappointed and I don't want her to also feel like lonely in herself or stuff like that, you know, like all these like consequential feelings. And I just had to bite the bullet and do it because I did that, but I also found a different source for her to talk about that with. Like, I'm going to try and find her a therapist and like convince her to speak to someone and stuff as well. So it's like, it was a much deeper consequence than just asking someone at work, like, oh, I can't do that piece of work because of XYZ. But that feeling of, okay, I know they're now going to have, you know, a large work pile and they're probably going to have to work overtime, that doesn't upset me too much.
Or they'll probably find someone else to pass it on to. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's so true, actually. I guess, yeah, that does make sense. I think, thinking about it now, the way you've spoken about that is, I don't think I've ever expressed a boundary then in my personal life. Like, I think I've done what you've said you've done previously, where you just kind of take a step back.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know if that is that a form of a physical boundary then, but do you have to communicate it? Because I'm not sure if
you've ghosted people.
Not even ghosting, but have I well, yeah, maybe ghost. And it's not even like intentional. Sometimes there's been different scenarios where, no, to be fair, there have been situations where it's not, the thing is, I don't think I set boundaries. I just tell you like where you went wrong or how you've upset me. And if you're not willing to like acknowledge that, and you're gonna try and like debate how upset I should
Yeah.
be, or like whether like whether I have a I guess a reason to be upset, or whether I deserve to be, then I'm gonna be like, okay, bye.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of how, I don't know if that is a boundary, or I don't know what the term
I
is
feel
for
like
that.
it's probably a boundary between that you're setting for yourself, which is good because you're still protecting you. Like you're not just going back to that person and letting yourself be hurt over and over again. So you are setting a boundary, but it's not necessarily with that person, it's against that person.
There's a wall now.
Yeah.
That is
There's no unison in saying.
Do you know what? Yeah, I think I've realized that I have a habit of letting things get to the very last straw before I. But it's not like people don't know beforehand that like I'm not happy. Like
So
it's
you
not...
have voiced it like the first time you were unhappy. Well, I think so. Just because we have so many similarities, anyway. Like I do this as well. Like something will irk me, and I'll keep it within me.
Yeah,
and I
it's
won't
kind of
voice
like,
it.
ooh, that wasn't right, but
Yeah.
I let it slide. Maybe that's my problem, because then that I haven't set the boundary. I should have been like, I didn't like that. Don't do it again.
Mm-hmm.
But I've just done that internally. And then it's happened again. I'm like, okay, no.
They did it again.
Done.
Why?
Yeah. But then sometimes I get to a point where I'm like, if you were gonna go and do that and I had to tell you not to, then you're not the kind of person I want to be around. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's certain
Okay.
things that you shouldn't have to tell people how to behave. So, and it's only those situations where I'm like, if you genuinely feel in your heart that that was the right way to go about it, and you, even still, like after I've expressed that I'm not happy,
Mm-hmm.
you are still gonna try and say that you did nothing wrong, then, and if it was that severe that I'd be like, okay, I actually don't like want to be around you anymore, then I feel like I don't know how else I would go about that, because realistically, if I would have said it earlier, and then the only reason you wouldn't go, actually, I think people like that would do it again. I think that's, like, I'd really believe that.
I think there's probably a balance between like, okay, so it depends how old you are, I think, because I feel like if you're in your 20s and above and you're behaving like oddly, or you know, you're just weird. Yeah. I don't even know how to describe specific behavior here. If you're just like not a good person.
Yeah.
It's obviously,
You just don't treat people well. I
yeah,
feel like that kind of person.
like this kind of stuff, then I feel like you could get checked and it could be more constructive. Like you could check someone and it could be more constructive. But I definitely feel like, so I'm 28. If I meet a new friend and they act in a way that is weird or they don't treat people well, for me it's less of a conversation. It's more of just like, okay, I'm out.
Yeah, I was about to say the exact same thing. It's like, at this point, I don't think you would even entertain it, would you? You wouldn't be like, I didn't really like how you did that. Can we try again? You'd just be like...
But I would have done that at like probably 21. And you know what? That's even a friggin' lie, because last year I let some things happen that were not good, and I was 27 then. So maybe I've learned a lot in the last year, but I think probably maybe before 2024 I would have fought for bad behavior a lot more to try and keep it in my life, whereas now it's like,
Oh, yeah.
I'm better off without it.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I think lessons have to be learnt, I think, when you come across situations like that, because there's been situations, for example, in friendship where I don't think I've ever well, up until about a year ago, I never really had a friendship where I had to actually be like, wow, you're treating me really badly, like this isn't okay. And then having to like completely cut it off. I would normally... Have I? Yes, I actually have had that situation many, many times.
I feel like you're like mentally blacking out.
I know, I do that a lot. Do you know what? It's just too much trauma. It has to be buried deep in the surface. Do you know what though? I feel like I think that is my problem. I forget how people treat me, and then I just end up in the same situation again. So this is why boundaries are important, because if you recognize, I feel like if you know what boundaries you're setting as well, you recognize behavior very
Mm-hmm.
early on. I feel like I let it get to the point where maybe it's like it's got that far along that now I have to cut them off because like they've actually treated me so badly that you can't stay friends with someone like that.
Yeah. And I do think like a sense of self-respect has to come in here, because like if you have to respect yourself enough to like audit the behavior around you to decide, to be able to decide like, okay, this is staying, this is going, because this is what I want to keep in my life, this is what I don't. And I definitely, and that's why this year I've literally actively, very intentionally been trying to build self-esteem and self-confidence, because I want it to be so like unbreakable that it's so easy for me to set boundaries. It's so easy for me to just like attract good things in my life. And I didn't have that last year. So I think building that will enable the boundaries to be set. It's not necessarily a case of like you have to just get really good at disappointing people or standing up for yourself. It's like you have to get really good at knowing what you want in your life and being like crystal clear on it. So I feel like that's a good starting point on being able to set boundaries. And like look at your relationships and like everything, like friends, family, partners, professional, like everything, and think about all the stuff that you put up with and all the stuff that makes you not feel so great, and whether you can just remove those things, and like why is it that you're putting up with those things now. Question everything. It's a good way to find some answers.
That's so to be. No, I think you made a really good point about the stuff you attract into your life. Because if you are keeping yourself surrounded by people that obviously are making you feel bad, that people that you want to probably set boundaries with, but you just have that fear or you don't want to upset them, you're going to attract more of that into your life. And you're going to, if you don't have the confidence to do that, maybe that's been my problem, because I've never really expressed those. My boundaries have always been physical and like that last straw where I've been like, actually, no. But then I've not really maybe communicated with people like enough in advance. So maybe that's why it keeps happening. I'm just trying to learn my lessons already and get this over with.
No, I don't know, because I feel like you have a really strong set of values, and I feel like if someone acted out of line according to what you believe is a good person and not, like you, Farah, I think I don't know if I would give them the chance to like correct that, because like your values, and also mine to be honest, are strong enough. Like if they're acting out of line, I'm not going to try and explain you out of that because you're weird.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. It comes down to that. Like, if your values aren't aligned as friends or as family, then there's no point in that relationship being there. Like, I shouldn't have to teach you. Like, if you have different values, that's totally fine. But like, have them over there. You don't have to be in my circle and have, because I think that's where strong relationships develop as well, is you having that core value system that is aligned.
Yeah, completely agree. And also, even if it's not like completely aligned, it's like if you have your core sets of values, but you actually have a lot of respect for each other's sets of values, that's also something that's allowed to happen, to like have a good relationship, friendship, whatever it is with someone. So it's not necessarily that you have to like, you can only have people who have the exact same values as you, but you do need people who like respect your beliefs of the world. And then vice versa as well. So it does come down to that, which is always quite deep, but
it is. But it does come down to like, if you do want genuine, true, like solid relationships in your life, then you do have to go down to that level, because a lot of people have very superficial friendships, relationships, like they're always on the surface, and those are the kind of people that are friends with everyone, and like people that look like they're super popular and then they've got a big circle, and that's the stuff that we all are kind of a bit jealous of and feel like, oh, I wish I had that life. But actually, like they don't really align with these people. They don't really, like, it takes that little thing for them to fall out with that person, because they don't actually respect each other that much. That's not really what you want. Again, that's like attracting more of that energy into your life if you're keeping that there. And of course it's okay to have acquaintances and people that you see now and then you're polite to. Like, we all want to be polite to everyone regardless, but I guess it comes down to that thing of like, who do you actually call? Like, I know I've spoken before about being that girl that would think of everyone as a best friend and like, or give everyone the same kind of energy, and I'm definitely not that girl anymore, because I think it's very important to protect your energy in the same way that you would want to like let people know like, this is how I expect to be treated, and if you can't fulfill that, then like, you're not in my circle. And I think it's okay to do that. I don't think anyone should feel ashamed of that. But again, have to reiterate, like, having people in your life that are good at doing that when you're not good at doing that is so helpful. Like, I know being around Sunny has actually helped me a lot, because he's really good at doing that. Like, I don't know if it's a guy thing.
How does he do it?
He's just very good at, I think it is a guy thing, because there's certain situations where, I don't know, it's not so much a boundary setting, but it's just those situations where I don't want to offend someone. I don't want to say my true opinion, because I dislike people pleasing. I just don't want to upset someone for the sake of it, or like, I don't know. But he'll just be so quick to be like, nah, I don't like that, or I'm not about it, or I don't want to do that. And he's very firm on it. And I think knowing him for so long has actually like just given me a bit of confidence to do the same, because I've
you do become more like your partner as well, I think.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Like, that's why you have to be very careful who you pick, because you're gonna become him.
That's so true, I think. And you've just made me think, like, oh, in my life, like, interactions I've had with people when they've been like Sunny, where if they've been very vocal about things they don't like, I've always been like, okay, I wish I could be more like you. Like, I've never personally been like, oh, you're being picky, or oh, you're being difficult. I've always thought, oh, I wish I could do the same.
Or you just outright respect. You know, when someone respects themselves and they have that aura of, they're like,
yes,
this is me, and you'll take it or leave it. You actually have so much respect for them. I feel like when you don't have that respect for yourself to stand up and be like, this is me, take it or leave it, people won't have that respect for you. So I think that you assume that, oh, and there will be some people out there that are like, oh, you're too much, or you're disagreeable, or like, those things might come up. But as a whole, I feel like in more situations, there'll be people that actually respect that and are like, they know what they want and they're sure of themselves, and they'll rate that rather than like want to discredit it.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me of a story that I honestly think about every week.
Really?
In
I'm
my
gonna
head.
hear this one then.
It's not a great story. It's just like something I think about often. It was like when I was working in a cafe at university, and one of my friends who also worked at the cafe, she was just I think she had like a PT, and she really wanted to get like 10 pull-ups by the end of summer, and she had this like holiday with her boyfriend that she wanted to be like super muscly and like nice for, like as you do. So she was training, and I think she also got like, she had like panic attacks, and like exercise really helped her minimize those. Just, she had loads of like good reasons basically to have invested in this PT at uni. And there was an evening at the cafe where we were celebrating something, and the owner brought in like loads of cake and like cupcakes and like loads of just like sweet treats, because it was like a cafe where we baked really nice things. And she was working late with me and like a bunch of other people, and all of us were like eating all these like cakes and cupcakes and stuff, and people were really pressuring her to like have some. And I remember I asked her like, oh, do you want some of this, because like it was something that she really enjoyed, and she looked at it, thought for like 30 seconds and was like, nah. And people kept like trying to be like, it's just one cake, it's like one evening, you can just have some. And she was just like, I just don't want any, and left early. And I think about that all the time, because she was so like, just that her like demeanor when she did it was so like, she was just so committed to her goals and like herself, and they weren't like these amazing, like she wasn't doing any kind of crazy competition. She just wanted to reduce her panic attacks and enjoy her holiday with her boyfriend in like 6 months time. Like, it was a long-term goal, and she was sticking to it. On even this one evening, she was like, I'm not gonna have a tiny little sliver of a cupcake. And the reason I think about that so much is just because there's so many times where I've just been like, fine, I'll just have that extra drink, or I'll have that cake, even though I complain all the time about not being consistent with my diet and all this stuff. And I've always gone back on my own goals for myself. and like even like overstep my own boundaries was something that I've set with myself. And she had that like complete self-respect and like self-assuredness to not do that one time. So yeah, I think about it often. It reminds me of Sonny as well. Like I can imagine the way that he would just be like, nah.
Yeah, he's very much that guy. And I think, yeah, when it comes to peer pressure, I feel like that's another level of, it's just like a crunch time of, is your boundary really going to be implemented or are you going to crumble? And there's definitely, I guess it just depends. Again, it comes down to like what it is for, because there's so many instances I've had that when it comes to like, especially at uni and with alcohol. And so many, when there were so many other like girls or people that were Muslim that were drinking, and then people would be like, oh, well, they're doing it. So, you know, and I'd be like, well, I ain't them. So
Yeah.
what do you want me to do about that? And that, yeah, there will be some things that I'm just, I don't know where that comes from then. There's some, I guess it's more a case of when it's something that I alone want to like implement, that's a bit, I get a bit of fear around that because then I feel more alone in wanting to implement that boundary. But when it's something like that, when it's like a whole community represents like what I believe in as well. And I don't know, I find that a bit easier to be like, well, this is the way I am. And a lot of other people are that way as well. So I'm not like the only one. But when it's a boundary that I want to just like, you know, one-on-one, or if it's a situation like you were talking about where she had a specific goal for herself that was very nuanced to her situation, what she wanted to do in her own personal life, and she still stuck to that, I would definitely have been the person that was like, okay, I'll have a little bit.
Well, I think it just comes down to like, I'm, by the way, side note, completely kind of shook that people are pressuring you to drink. But
yeah.
I think because you're like a cultural and a religious reason to do or not do something, I think is something that you have like a lot of clarity and faith in, right? It's something that you're super committed to on a really like deep basis with yourself. And I think if you can get to that level with any real reason, like obviously this girl I knew was at that level with her panic attacks and wanting to enjoy her holiday. And like I've just finished 75 hard. I was super clear on the fact that I wanted to get to the final day. Like I did not want to fail. And I'm surprised I have not talked about this on the podcast so far, because I feel like the entire 75 days I was like setting boundaries like every single day, because like I had to like, I still wanted to socialize. I didn't want to completely hibernate. So I had to set boundaries with like, okay, I can't drink alcohol. We can't go to a bar. We can't go to a restaurant. We can't, there's so many things you can't do.
So you've just been doing it for 75 days straight, Deb. Come on, tell us your secrets. How did you do it?
Well, it's literally boundary setting. Like that's why I'm annoyed I haven't actually brought it up. But I just vocalized that to my friends. But then again, I gave context. I was like, okay, so we can't do an evening because I can't drink, and I don't want to go to a bar because I don't want to be around drink, and we also can't go to a bar because I'm tracking my calories. So
how
let's
did people
go for
respond to that? Were they in a similar situation? Did they understand? Were they a bit like, you're being a bit high maintenance here? Like, what was the vibe?
It was definitely 50-50 of like people being like, wow, can't believe you're doing that, like couldn't be me. There's some people who just like, I just didn't see because
they couldn't give up the drink, they couldn't give up the bars.
Yeah, like we couldn't make it work like outside of that, which is fine. But there's people, because I gave the context, I was like, oh, I'm doing this challenge and I actually really want to finish it. Like I'm not taking the piss here. Like I'm not just attempting it and I'm gonna fail just because I can't say no to a drink or whatever. Like it's really important to me that I finish it, and like a lot of people just had respect for that. And to be fair, I feel like just because of social media and like the challenge being something to talk about and stuff as well, like I just milked that, like I leveraged it as a fact that I can be like, oh, I'm doing this like really interesting thing, and like I can tell you about it on our walk that we drink water or tea on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think boundaries is super important, and I think I definitely needed context for 75 hard ones. But the 75 hard is a really good example of like being super clear on like a reason that then makes it so much easier for you to just stick to your own guns and set boundaries itself.
Maybe that's a good place to start then, because I feel like if you do actually start with a challenge and a reason to like give people of why you can't do certain things, and you just, the things that you want to implement into your life, just pretend it's a challenge that you're doing. If it's something that's like quite different to your usual, like if you're trying to implement a new boundary with people that already exist in your life and know you in a certain way, because I feel like that's the tricky part. Is like if you've just been letting things slide for a while, then how do you suddenly turn around and go like, actually, I know that was okay, it was okay before, but it ain't anymore, like it's not going to fly with me anymore. So they are obviously going to be like, well, it was okay before, so what's changed? And it'll just create a bit of like extra like stress for you. So maybe depending on what it is, you could just be like, this is part of my 75 hard challenge, I can't do this, and they have to respect it. And then going forward, like after 75 days, how long is that, like a month and a half, 2 months and a half?
Yeah, 2.5
So then
months.
surely they, by that point, it'll be habit for people to like see you operate in that way.
Yeah, definitely. Could do like a mental health work-life balance challenge. That's why I'm finishing work at 5 today.
Yeah, I operate and work the same way. To be fair, yeah, when it comes to work, there was a point in time where I'd just be like, I'm clocking off at this time and I ain't telling anyone that I have to be
I do
somewhere
that.
or what I've got to do. Doesn't matter. I'm out.
That's your approach to a lot.
Out the door.
I'm outie.
Maybe I need to go back to therapy and unpack that a little bit more. I still do it to this day. It might be a problem. I don't know. It served me well so far.
It's not a problem. It's not a problem for you.
Yeah, it served me well.
Exactly.
That's why I continue to do it, because it's like I'm not. It's not I'm not being disadvantaged by doing that. I'm just like taking out the trash. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think that was a fruitful conversation. I think it's really interesting to like understand these like buzzwords that we hear all the time. How do they actually work in practice? Like, how do people deal with boundary setting? So let us know in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. If you are someone that's pretty good at setting boundaries, if you're learning how to, let us know your experience, because I think it's one of those things that, I don't know, you just born to be good at setting boundaries, some people, or you're just in an environment where that's respected a bit more. I feel like as South
The boundary
Asians,
gym. I think you need to go to the boundary gym and learn
stretch
how to
those
build
muscles.
boundaries.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I feel like for South Asians in particular, it's one of those things that are maybe a bit more awkward conversations to have, and just something that we've had to learn later on in life. But yeah, we hope you've enjoyed the episode, guys. Let us know what you think. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube and subscribe. And also make sure you give us a rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We want to know what you guys are thinking of our episodes. And with that being said, we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.